The knock on my door that morning wasn't just loud, it was arrogant. You could tell when someone thought the world revolved around them just by the rhythm of their knock. I opened the door to see a woman standing there in a bright floral blouse, oversized sunglasses, and the unmistakable air of entitlement. She didn't even introduce herself before speaking. "You're trespassing on HOA property," she announced, flipping through a folder like she was some kind of deputy of the neighborhood police. "We'll be issuing you a notice of eviction if you don't vacate within 72 hours. I stared at her for a long second, not sure whether to laugh or just shut the door. Trespassing? On my own ranch, the one my grandfather had built with his bare hands before this county even had paved roads? "Lady," I said finally, leaning on the doorframe, "I've lived here since before there even was a homeowners association around here." She frowned, lips pursed. "The Maple Valley Estates HOA now manages this entire zone. Your property falls under our jurisdiction. You'll need to comply or face legal consequences." Her name was Karen A. Of course it was. She was the self-appointed president of the HOA. A woman whose favorite hobby seemed to be making everyone else miserable, and apparently, she had just decided that my 200-acre ranch somehow belonged to her community. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't just another homeowner. I was the CEO of the National Homeowners Governance Council, a federal body that oversees and regulates every single HOA in the country. Every rule, every board, every fine issued, they ultimately, it all flowed up to me. And now this woman was trying to evict me. A few days later, I drove into town to grab some feed for the horses and noticed a crowd gathered by the HOA clubhouse. Karen was standing there with a megaphone, rallying her little army of clipboard warriors. "We can't allow non-compliant residents to stay," she was saying. "He's refusing to pay dues, refusing to landscape his perimeter. It's unacceptable." I parked my truck across the street and watched for a moment. She was serious. They had printed flyers, taken photos of my property, even filed a violation record. It was almost impressive, if it wasn't so absurd. I walked over, hands in my pockets. The crowd hushed when they saw me. "Morning, neighbors," I said evenly. "I see there's been some confusion." Karen puffed up like a peacock. "No confusion," she snapped. "You're in violation of HOA Code 4.38a, unapproved fencing, excess livestock, and unregistered structures. You'll receive your eviction order soon enough." I could have ended it right there. I could have flashed my credentials, shown her who I really was. But something in me wanted to see just how far she'd go. So I played along. "All right," I said. "Send me the paperwork. I'll review it." Her smirk told me she thought she'd already won. Over the next week, I received a pile of letters, fines, demands, threats of legal action, each one more aggressive than the last. They even sent someone to inspect my barn, which I politely escorted off my property after recording the entire encounter for documentation. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I made a few quiet calls. I had my assistant, Lydia, pull the HOA's federal registration documents. Turns out, Maple Valley Estates was riddled with violations: a misuse of funds, unreported elections, even discriminatory enforcement of rules. The kind of stuff that could get a board dissolved overnight. And when I say overnight, I mean literally overnight. 3 days later, I received one final letter from Karen. This one marked final notice, eviction imminent. That same afternoon, I had a different kind of notice sent to her. This one stamped with the seal of the U.S. Department of Housing Affairs. It read, "Greater than notice of immediate suspension. The Maple Valley Estates Homeowners Association is hereby placed under federal review for misconduct, improper governance, and violation of homeowner rights. All board members are hereby suspended pending investigation." When she got that letter, she stormed up my driveway like a tornado. "You can't do this," she yelled, waving the paper in my face. "You have no authority." I smiled, calm as could be. "Karen, you remember that paperwork I said I'd review?" I did, and I reviewed a lot more, too. I pulled out my identification badge, the same one I'd used when testifying before Congress the previous year. Her face went pale. "I don't just own this ranch," I said quietly. "I oversee every HOA in the country. And you've been violating federal policy for years." Her jaw dropped. She tried to speak, but all that came out was a faint, trembling whisper. "Gary Broken Bar, you're lying." I leaned in. "No, ma'am, I wrote the rules you've been abusing." She backed away slowly, eyes wide with shock, as the realization set in that her little empire of control was gone. Within a week, the entire Maple Valley HOA board was disbanded. An interim committee was appointed under federal supervision, and every homeowner who'd been fined or harassed by Karen's regime received formal apologies and refunds. Karen herself tried to appeal, but when the investigation uncovered the embezzled funds she'd redirected to her personal account, she disappeared from the neighborhood altogether. The funniest part, the same residents who once feared her started stopping by my ranch just to say thank you. Some brought pies, others brought coffee or homemade jam. But what really mattered was the peace that returned to that valley, a peace that had been missing for far too long. One evening, as the sun set over the hills and my horses grazed by the fence, Lydia called me. "You handled that with more patience than I ever could." She laughed. I chuckled. "You don't fight arrogance with anger," I said. "You fight it with truth and authority." I looked out at my land, at the same soil my grandfather had walked, the same wind that carried his laughter. Some people spend their lives chasing power. Others just try to live peacefully, until power comes knocking on their door demanding something that was never theirs to begin with. And when that happens, a broken bar, you don't just defend what's yours. You remind them who truly governs the land.